Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this, for us here on the East Coast Friday morning, technically. Out west, still Thursday night. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at the Kennedy Space Center. Hope you're all having a good week so far. We appreciate you stopping by for our coverage of the Starlink 6-101 mission set to take flight in just under 1 hour. Current T0 is 2:22 a.m. Eastern, 07:22 UTC for our friends around the world. The Falcon 9 rocket will be flying a southeasterly trajectory set to land on the drone ship. Just read the instructions out in the Atlantic about 8.5 minutes after liftoff. We certainly appreciate those of you who were able to stay up late for this coverage tonight, or for those in other parts of the world. If you're getting up early, or if this is a much more sensible time, appreciate you stopping by. You could do us a big favor as we're getting things rolling here just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Speaking of folks who are in a much more sensible time zone, I want to thank our moderator at the moment, or moderators, Aussie Space Girl, joining us from down in Australia. Also, thanks to Astro Joe and Jeff Hansen for being with us here as well. You can all make the mod's job that much easier just by following our live chat rules. We ask that you post your message in English so that our mods can respond as appropriate. Also, that you hold off from delving into topics of overt religion or politics, and please don't use all caps. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large chunk of the live chat. And last but certainly not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. We'll all get along swimmingly. It looks like Astro Joe will be here for a moment and then off again. But we appreciate you for stopping by for the time that you are able to be here. Also want to thank one of our channel members, Cubus Granadas, for being here with us in the chat to help answer folks' questions as we go throughout the broadcast. Speaking of our channel members, this and every other live launch opportunity are made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful community of channel members here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Tommy Boy 14, CRS, AJ Vanderberg, From the Mill, M. Teresa, and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spacelightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Behind the scenes, this broadcast is supported with technical support by our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young. Our photographer is also standing by, ready to support tracking and coverage of tonight's flight. If you're not following the fellows, you can find them here at their handles on X. Adam is at ABurnNYC. Michael is at MD Kane Jr. and John is at John Pisani Photo. Also, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook, in addition to X. We'll also be joined a little bit later in our coverage by our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. Time now currently T minus 40 or 54 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. In addition to keeping tabs on what's going on here at Space Launch Complex 40, we've also been checking in with what's happening over at Launch Complex 39B. Answer to that for this evening is it appears to be not a whole heck of a lot as far as what we were expecting to be discussing at this point in these overnight hours. Crews were expected to be called to stations in support of what's called the wet dress rehearsal. This is a tanking test of the Space Launch System rocket in order to validate that it is ready to proceed into a launch campaign. And so, like with the launch, teams will step into the little more than 49-hour countdown timeline and run it exactly as they will on the days leading up to launch itself. One of the main differences, though, of course, is that the crew, the four astronauts, are still in quarantine at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And so they are not directly in loop for the WDR as far as physically entering Orion or anything like that. However, there has been no confirmation from NASA about the status of the WDR, but it is our understanding that the test may have delayed by as much as 48 hours. I think we've reached out to NASA for comment and for any kind of update and answer to our questions about the status of the test, and we have not heard back from them. Hopefully that will change in the morning time, but for now and in these overnight hours, we're unfortunately left with more questions than answers. But of course, as we learn things more concretely, we'll be sure to pass that information along to you. The wet dress rehearsal is one of the last big items that is in the way for NASA to be able to declare a target launch date with more specificity. Right now, the launch period that is available to NASA opens up in the February months, or the month of February on the 6th at 9:41 p.m. Eastern. That is the first opportunity out of a handful that exist within the month of February. And if none of those look like they're going to pan out, NASA has also outlined dates available in March and April as well. Bringing things back here to the Falcon 9 launch. For those who didn't have a chance to catch the time lapse video that we shared that was shot by our Adam Bernstein, the Falcon 9 rocket wasn't raised into the vertical position until right around 10 o'clock or so tonight. So a bit of a tight turnaround for SpaceX. The timing of the rocket going vertical, of course, meant that SpaceX was certainly not going to be launching at the opening of the window tonight. But as things currently stand, the T0 has been holding steady for some time now at 2:22 a.m. Eastern, 07:22 UTC. Just about 49 and a half minutes on the clock. Want to welcome in new channel member Taco King, joining us with membership at the PAD leader level. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Time now T minus 48 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. The first stage booster that SpaceX will use to launch this mission has the tail number of 1095 in the SpaceX fleet. This will be just its fifth trip to space and back after launching four previous batches of Starlink V2 mini satellites. Of course, with such a comparatively newer booster, not nearly enough missions to secure a spot just yet on the Falcon 9 frequent flyers list, the most flown boosters for SpaceX. Here's where things currently stand with this lineup. No change from this morning, or I guess for us here on the East Coast, technically yesterday morning, with the launch of the Starlink 17-19 mission from California. Tonight's launch will represent the 595th launch of a Falcon 9 rocket, the 13th of the year so far, and the final scheduled Falcon 9 launch of the month of January. just under 43 and a half minutes remaining on the clock as SpaceX works towards the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket carrying 29 more Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites into low Earth orbit. As we're getting closer to the start of fueling tonight, let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about the countdown timeline. The milestone still ahead for SpaceX as it gets ready to fly its 13th Falcon 9 of the year. Things will get started at around T minus 38 minutes with the call that they are go for the start of prop load. SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, so if they're in a good position to do this, they can make that assessment a little bit ahead of the T minus 38-minute mark. But once there is consensus, fueling will begin at the T minus 35-minute point in the count with a loading of RP1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin to flow on board the rocket's first stage. 30 minutes before takeoff, SpaceX will load cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and they'll do the same on the second a few minutes after that. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP1 loading is expected to wrap up. At T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down gets underway. At this point in the count, SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. We'll see this visually as the so-called big vent beginning around T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds here at pad 40, lasting a little less than 4 minutes in duration. The vent will conclude and set the stage for the LOX to start to flow on board the rocket's upper stage, T minus 16 minutes. Speaking of LOX, at T minus 7 minutes, that's when SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the rocket's plumbing and turbo pumps, and that will help protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. T minus 6 minutes is when the first stage kerosene tank is full. 4.5 minutes before flight, the strong back retract sequence begins. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It will stay in that position up until liftoff. Then it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute afterwards. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 has entered into its automated startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will then confirm that they are in fact go for launch at T minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is given at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting that departure at 2:22 a.m. Eastern. That is 0722 UTC for our friends around the world. Just about 39 minutes from now. Or another way to think about that is we're about a minute away from the decision point for SpaceX on the start of prop load. With less than 30 minutes remaining at this point in time, SpaceX should have made a call about the start of prop load tonight if that go ahead was given. Fueling is set to begin in right about 2 minutes. Time now T minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, SpaceX should be just beginning to fuel its Falcon 9 rocket, loading that RP-1 on board the booster and upper stage and liquid oxygen on board the rocket's first stage as well. Given that this is a now standard Starlink mission for the company, we more than likely will not be getting an update from SpaceX that fueling has begun, so we'll rely on visual cues to confirm that fueling is in fact underway. What we're watching for is a bit of a frost line start to form near the base of the rocket's first stage. Should also be a little vapor in the area as well. As you can see, though, even though it is on the cooler side tonight, there's a fair amount of heat distortion between us and the Falcon 9 rocket, so it makes it a little bit difficult to make that determination, but we should be able to sort this out in the next couple of minutes or so. Time now, T minus 30 minutes and counting. It is quite difficult to make the distinction between what appears to be that frost line that I mentioned and the quite pronounced heat distortion tonight, but it does appear that we are seeing some visual signs of fueling. That combined with the fact that the clock is still ticking gives us some degree of confidence that SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket in the pursuit of a liftoff here in just under half an hour. Time now, T minus 28 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, SpaceX is also loading cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and is coming up on doing the same on the second stage in the next couple of minutes. 26 and a half minutes remaining on the clock here as we're getting closer to the big vent coming up at around T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. SpaceX also had an announcement about uh, what is a new system from the public's perspective. Thursday afternoon, they unveiled what they're calling Stargaze, a space situational awareness system that uses the star trackers on the more than 9,500 Starlink satellites in order to help better determine where other objects are in low Earth orbit to help them avoid potential conjunctions or collisions in orbit. And they're actually going to be rolling this out to other satellite users free of charge. SpaceX says the Stargaze system will pull on data collected from about 30,000 star trackers. And they've already begun a what they call a closed beta version of this system with about a dozen other satellite operators, but they have not named who those operators are. The company points back to an incident in late 2025 when they used the Stargaze system in order to avoid a different satellite that was not providing the type of information that would allow for a more seamless avoidance maneuver, and things came fairly down to the wire for SpaceX in their telling of things. And so having a number of players participate in this Stargaze system will hopefully allow for a safer low Earth orbit environment moving forward as more and more satellite operators and increasingly more satellites get added to what is becoming a very busy part of the neighborhood. Time now, T minus 22 minutes, 38 seconds, and counting. Coming up tomorrow in a pair of briefings, we should be hearing much more about the progress towards the launch of the Crew 12 mission. This will be the next long duration set of astronauts and cosmonaut who will head up to the International Space Station on board a SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. At 11 a.m., we'll be hearing from the folks at more of a NASA manager level. And then at 1 p.m., we'll have a briefing where we'll be hearing directly from the crew of Crew 12 themselves about their upcoming mission, which is slated to last about 9 months on board the International Space Station. Crew 12 is being pulled forward a couple of days, potentially as early as February 11th, after previously targeting no earlier than February 15th launch day. Of course, earlier this month, Crew 11 came back about a month earlier than originally anticipated from the space station, and that was due to an issue of medical concern that NASA felt after an assessment was best for one of the astronauts, still unnamed and likely will remain unnamed for the foreseeable future. They wanted to be able to better diagnose the issue on Earth and provide whatever treatment would be necessary for the medical issue that cropped up. And so that left NASA with a gap between the departure of Crew 11 and the arrival of Crew 12. Normally, they'd prefer to have a direct handover in space. And so now NASA astronaut Chris Williams is holding down the fort as the lone American alongside two cosmonauts from Roscosmos. If the February 11th date will stick, we'll see a launch at 6 a.m. that Wednesday. Speaking of seeing things, we're starting to see this beginning of the big vent here at the pad as SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. Taking a look at our live chat as well. Want to thank a couple folks for their support tonight. Thanks to Evan S. DJE for the $2 super chat. Thank you, Evan. And thank you to channel member Michael McRory for $5 super chat. Really appreciate the support tonight. The big vent is now wrapping up. Second stage LOX load is set to start in around 20 seconds from now. Time now T minus 15 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. As we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, the Falcon 9 first stage booster being used with tonight's flight has the tail number B1095 in the SpaceX fleet. This will be just its fifth trip to space and back, so Let's take a look now briefly at its flight history. It began in May of last year with the launch of the Starlink 12-15 flight, carrying 23 Starlink satellites up into low Earth orbit. All of the flights for this booster so far have been in support of the Starlink fleet. Next up was 10-56 on August 27th. Then you had 10-52 on October 16th. And most recently, Starlink 6-86 on December 1st. That'll bring us up to today, where now actually February 1st will be sorry, the 30th. Yes, will still be the launch of this booster. Here are the turnaround times for it so far. Time now T minus 10 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Taking a look back at our live chat now, I want to thank the nearly 1,000 of you who are watching us live at this very odd hour overnight. So certainly appreciate you being with us. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream to allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also want to thank T Cal for a very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that, T. Sounds like sending some graduation well wishes. That's always wonderful to think about graduation day being not too far around the corner. Thank you again for your support tonight. Time now T minus 8 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. In roughly a minute and a half, SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. That will help protect them from thermal shock and damage during startup. I want to thank one of our channel members, Rocket Lady Elizabeth, for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Good to see you this evening, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for helping to grow our community here on YouTube. So, to our newest gifted member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And be sure to thank Elizabeth in the live chat if you haven't already. We just hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. As we're getting ever closer to the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket tonight, let's go ahead and talk about where it will be flying once it does leave the pad. Talking a little trajectory here. The Falcon 9 rocket will take flight from Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40, there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It's set to fly on a southeasterly trajectory, heading away from Florida's Space Coast. About 2.5 minutes, the booster will separate from the rocket's upper stage and begin its journey towards the drone ship. That's called Just Read the Instructions. Touchdown is expected around 8.5 minutes post liftoff. A good recovery on this vessel would mark the 149th successful landing on this particular drone ship for SpaceX and the 566th booster landing for the company to date. In addition to retrieving the first stage, SpaceX will also be eager to get the payload fairings back. Once they're down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, they'll be brought aboard a SpaceX recovery vessel, brought back through Port Canaveral, then onto the Hangar X site, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Coming up on the final 5 minutes before liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket, momentarily we should be getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 as well as mission audio courtesy of SpaceX.
Tanks are pressing for the start of Stromback retract.
And as you just heard, we are getting that aforementioned mission audio as well as those pad level views.
Strongback lower has started.
Looks like there's a nice little cameo from the moon just beyond the crew access tower from the shot that we just saw. And as you can see, the clamp arms opening up between or beneath the payload fairings, and the large truss structure, the strong back, will soon recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket, just a few degrees up till liftoff. After that, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. And there you see it's now getting into motion. About 3.5 minutes remaining on the clock. Just under 3 minutes
Stage 1,
remaining.
LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is now at flight levels. We should hear a similar call regarding second stage LOX load around T minus 2 minutes. Two minutes and counting.
Stage 2, LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant.
Ground gas closeouts.
That call regarding the venting you're seeing there from the strong pack, SpaceX is releasing the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines.
Falcon 9 has entered startup.
With that call, we're just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm that they are in fact go for launch.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that confirmation, SpaceX is now just a little more than 30 seconds away from flight. Fifteen seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-101 flight. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now T plus 1 minute into flight. Rocket approaching max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Now throttling up after max Q. Next, SpaceX will thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's second stage.
MVAC chill.
Good call there for MVAC chill. SpaceX has a few events in quick succession coming up next. They'll start with first stage main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings will jettison right about at the 3-minute mark in flight. Some excellent work as always by our tracking team. Very clear conditions this evening. Coming up on MECO. Stage
Main engine
separation.
cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
And second stage engine start.
MVAC startup.
See those hypersonic grid fins deploying now on the rocket's booster. Fairing separation is coming up next.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there go the payload fairings. Those fairing halves will fall back to Earth and splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a little bit further downrange from where the booster is set to land on the drone ship. Coming up into 4 minutes post liftoff. A little more than 2 minutes from now is when the 3-engine entry burn is set to begin. That will help dramatically slow the first stage booster down. Still climbing at the moment. Looks like this first stage booster 1095 will top out at around 113 kilometers in altitude. Now starting to make its descent towards the drone ship. Just a little more than a minute away now from the start of that entry burn. About 20 seconds remaining till the start of that burn.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
and a good ground level view of that entry burn as well on that big box.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of that
Stage
entry
2
burn,
FTS is saved.
as you just heard, the second stage flight termination system has been saved, no longer needed at this point in the mission. The next big milestone for SpaceX will be the single engine landing burn, set to begin a little bit before or right about at the 8-minute mark in flight. And that'll take the booster 1095 all the way down to the drone ship. Just read the instructions.
Stage 1 transonic.
The booster now traveling below the speed of sound. And as a reminder, after booster landing, stick around. We've got a roundup of all the launch views that we captured at liftoff. So be sure to stay with us for those replays.
Stage 1 landing burn. Landing lead deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And for a fifth time, B-1095 has safely returned to Earth.
MVAC shutdown.
Good orbit insertion.
And with those confirmations now behind us, the upper stage will coast until about T plus 53 minutes and 52 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second upper stage engine burn to circularize its orbit. And then the Starlink satellites will be released at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 59 seconds post liftoff. And again, we've got those replays in work for you, so stick around to get a view of all the various angles by which we were able to capture liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40. While we are waiting those, let's hop on over and talk about the mission stats for this particular flight. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, that marked the 5th trip to space and back for B-1095. This was SpaceX's 595th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 13th of the year so far. This was the company's 529th Falcon 9 Falcon booster reflight, the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 166th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 305th orbital flight from Space Launch Complex 40 for SpaceX, and the 360th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's a look at the bar chart representation of the Falcon family of rockets. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 149th good landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. That marked SpaceX's 464th drone ship landing, its 566th booster landing overall, and the 567th landing of an orbital class rocket, including the one so far from Blue Origin. Finally, with some industry stats, tonight's launch marked the 7th of the year from Florida, the 13th from U.S. soil, the 15th from a U.S. rocket company, including the launch earlier this evening from Rocket Lab down in New Zealand. Congrats to them. We now stand at 23 orbital launch attempts around the world, 3 mishaps on the year so far. Let's look at the Cape bar chart, number of missions here. Here's where our pie chart currently stands as far as countries represented around the world in their orbital launch capability. And it looks like we've got those replays ready for you now. So let's go ahead and kick things off with the fixed view from here at the press site. On to the wide view next. Onto the turn-based view now. Next on to Pete's South Tracker. Onto the wide tracker next. And here we are at the press site tracker. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here on our live coverage of the Starlink 6-101 mission from here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Want to thank channel member Cumulus Granatus for answering folks' questions in the chat. Thanks to our moderators who've been with us throughout the course of the coverage, to Jeff Hansen, Astro Joe, and Aussie Space Girl. Big thanks to our photographer friends, P. Carsons with Max Q Productions, and our own crew, Adam and John. As a reminder, you can always head over to our 24/7 live stream, Artemis Live, and keep visual tabs on what's going on with the SLS rocket and Orion spacecraft. We will hopefully get official word from NASA on the status of the all-important wet dress rehearsal tanking test, but as of this point, NASA has made no official statement and has not returned our questions about the status of the mission. We do have from multiple sources that the WDR is delayed to have a T0 now on Monday, with the call to stations happening 49-ish hours before then. So call to stations now set for Saturday, as things currently stand, is our understanding, but we're hoping to get some more color around that from NASA, hopefully in the early part of tomorrow. Want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's been running the technical operations of tonight's broadcast. Most importantly, though, want to thank you for wherever you've been watching from. We certainly appreciate your time and attention and look forward to welcoming you back here when we have another launch to cover, or perhaps some Artemis coverage as well. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.